Throughout the year, I attend tech conferences that allow me a bird's eye view into what some of the smartest teams around the world are building and bringing to market. I'm just recently returned from CES 2024, and if you saw my previous video on the Black Futurist YouTube channel, you saw what I consider to be my best in show moments. I thought you'd also benefit from hearing from some of my colleagues, the people that I attend these shows with and work alongside, who I also learn a lot from when I listen to their perspective, which might be slightly different than mine. So I asked 3 of them to come on today to talk about what their best in show moments were while attending CES 2024. That's Sarah Ivey, Tim Hanlon, and Dr. Brad Berens. Now, Sarah is the Chief Strategy Officer at Havas Media Group. Tim is a media industry consultant and the founder of the Verter Group. And Brad is an innovation and digital transformation expert and a prolific sci-fi writer. I hope you enjoy what they have to say, and I'd love to hear what you think. I'm Bryndan Moore. Welcome to the Black Futurist Podcast. The Black Futurist.
That's one small step for man.
Okay.
Sarah, what did you see at CES this year that was memorable, that you woke up talking about after you got back home?
You know, a lot of people talk about the technology. It actually was a really big change for me in terms of how the show runs. So, 2 things that leapt out to me, and we can go back and forth on them, is that what I did see a lot of is cross-technology collaboration in a way that we haven't seen before. So I think there's a gradual acceptance across the industry that if you invent a device, it's way more powerful if it's plugged into an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't just sort of APIs that could talk to each other. They were full on sort of co-development. I mean, the Afila car is a really good example, but it's slow to come to market and it's going to be really expensive. It's gorgeous, but it's going to be really expensive. But there were even side conversations that we didn't necessarily see on the floor. So one of the interesting things that really struck me was Noom, the weight loss application. You know, they've always specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, the biggest news in dieting is Ozempic, right? So they've actually figured out how to partner with Ozempic so actually their interfaces work better together. Now, those are completely different technologies, but that, for me, captures the spirit of collaboration that's we've seen it develop, but I feel like in this show, it really sort of leapt over where it was before. So
Right.
that was the part that really got me excited.
Nice. Story that you don't know, or maybe I did tell you. I was preparing for a tour on the implications of AI, and I sat at the conference room table, and I had about 10 minutes. People were showing up a half hour early. I don't know why, but I closed my eyes just to just get centered, and I feel this tap on my arm. This guy sitting next to me now, so I opened my eyes and I said, "Hey." He goes, "I just want you to know you got your work cut out for you." I said, "What?" He goes, "I did the digital health tour this morning with Sarah. You got your work cut out for you. She was excellent."
Oh, man.
That's great.
Oh, man.
That's wonderful.
It's so interesting.
Affirmation.
Well, listen, that was a tough tour to give, the AI tour, because it's like touring peanut butter, you know? Like AI was all over everything. You really couldn't tell it was real peanut butter or soy-based peanut butter. It was just like it was all over everything. And
Right.
you really had to dig to see whether it was actually real.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It was tough, but it made for good conversation. One of the things that I did on my AI tour was let them know in advance that, look, we're at theory now, and we're going to hypothesize when this is done. So I don't know anything. Let's go find out, and let's parse good from bad, or like exists versus doesn't exist, and see what's out there. Was there anything in digital health that jumps out to you there that was like, this is so important, I should go home and tell my best friend about it?
Quite a few. I do have a best in show, but I think you heard me wax poetic about Blue Sky AI, because it's good, strong academic facial recognition research that they first applied to driving technology. But every time we visited their booth, we found out about a new clinical trial. So just imagine a world in which your facial expressions can help you manage all kinds of things, whether that's driving distraction and drowsiness, but whether or not you're going to have a diabetic reaction, whether or not your autistic teenager is about to have an episode or is feeling really, no, their autism study is fascinating. Their diabetic study is fascinating. They started off with helping diagnose pregnancy mood swings, right? So the ability of facial recognition applied to, like, what I kept on, as I gave more tours, I started to realize, wow, we'll see this all over everything. next year because so many people have been in that booth and they're going to say, I figured out a way to do it.
Yeah.
Again, that's the collaboration piece, is that Blue Sky was there to find partners, right?
Mm,
The floor was full of partners. Can you imagine Abbott being able to apply that to their glucose monitoring that they unveiled at the show, right?
right.
And applied to the insulin pump, applied to
Right.
your phone. There's so many things that could be a foundational technology for, and that was so exciting. That was really,
That
yeah,
is cool. And in contrast, if I think about years before, especially with technologies that were so prevalent like LiDAR,
yeah,
years ago, like there was 12, 15 LiDAR providers all competing to be the one in the space, but they all have the same technology,
yeah,
which is competition. You're saying collaboration was the drum that was beating this year. And I love
absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah,
What else
yeah.
I know you were excited about the early cervical cancer detection. You want to talk about
Uh,
that?
the only frustrating thing about that is that it's based on the ability to access public health system data.
So it'll
So
work everywhere else in the world.
well, except the US, which is terrible, right? But just the ability to have that access to a very large data model and to be able to model out outcomes and understand markers. I mean, any country in which you have that, you
Mhm.
can think of 1,000 things to do with it, right? So once AI is able to process that very, very large amount of data, then the speed to market of something like cervical cancer detection, just being able to put that in the hands of a GP, it takes weeks off the diagnosis. So just for our listeners, what it was developed in Korea, and it's basically a photographic technique that basically takes a picture of the outside of the cervix and measures a particular acid, and from that they're able to detect whether it's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or clear.
Right.
And the ability to do that instantly without having to go through the rigmarole of swabs and going through an oncologist and stuff like that, it's going to have a huge impact on outcomes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Brendan, I was excited about everything that was on my tour. So, well, maybe not the sperm testing, but I'm not the right crowd for that. But anyway,
Right. There's a question I've been asking, and it comes up in different verticals. If there is a wild, wild west right now in terms of spending, meaning, when we talk about wild, wild west phenomena in terms of investing, we're like, these are the areas in which currently ROI is not even an issue. We have to dump this amount of resources into the chasm so that we can drive over it, and we'll worry about ROI later. Where would you say we're seeing wild, wild west type tendencies?
well, unfortunately, it is around artificial intelligence, but different aspects of it. So, um, everyone doesn't know what they need to know around generative AI. And the ability to figure out how to apply it is farther away than ever, but there's still that sense. It's FOMO, but it's FOMO with an extra scoop of risk on top because
Right.
there's a sense that if we don't understand it, we can't plan for it, we're missing opportunities. So that's where we see a lot of spending. The other place that I think is sort of counterbalancing that is in AI compliance, transparency issues,
Right.
privacy issues, creativity, license issues and stuff like that.
Hmm.
That correspondingly is rising at the same rate. So that was the sort of underpinnings of a lot of the conversation. Everyone's, oh, it's all about artificial intelligence. ChatGPT and generative AI wasn't really at the show other than in buttons, right? But it's a massive iceberg underneath the surface that everyone's trying to grapple with. I
Gotcha.
don't know whether you agree.
No, I agree. And it's good for ChatGPT that they have become synonymous with generative AI when
Yeah,
they are
it is.
just one
Yeah, just one
particular
of,
provider, right,
I
of
mean,
language.
what's happening with music, right? It'll be interesting to see what happens at different shows like South by will be also very interesting because that will be exploring creativity and the licensing of creativity. And of course, South by is, of course, a music festival. The musical applications in generative AI in music production, there's hundreds of them now.
Yeah.
And it just gives me the holy willies. Anyway.
Did you see anything in either screens or in the mixed reality space that you took home and said, I need to keep a pin in this and track this as it grows?
So the Luxottica booth, think actually had two of the most important things in the show, right?
Hmm.
No one was talking about that. No one was talking about the metaverse at the show, except the metaverse classes were actually pretty significant in terms of being able to open up that door for people who don't want to walk around with a huge headset on their heads, right?
Right.
So I actually thought that was really interesting from a The metaverse is not going away. It's just
Right.
not as big a hype, and it's always been there's a level of inaccessibility. So the things that didn't require a headset were becoming more important, but at the same time, headset does give you that sensory experience that you just can't get from other applications. So anyway, I thought that was important because I think it's going to bring down the price and make it more accessible and also
Yeah.
cooler
Yeah,
when we
and you
wait.
bring up Luxottica, which was one of my best in show. It's actually one of the most important things that I saw there because of the correlation between brain function and hearing loss. That makes that device, that hearing assistance in those glasses, an invisible hearing assistance, just to me one of the most important things for families.
Yeah, yeah. Did
Um,
you try
I did. I loved it. I thought it was great. I didn't like
it?
the battery life. The battery life is only 8 hours, and then you
Yeah,
got to recharge. But that's the same kind of like the Apple Watch battery is like less than it should be, right?
yeah,
Compared to like every other watch you own.
yeah. Well, for version one, that's actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
I'll work on
Mm-hmm.
that for version two. Yeah.
Right. In terms of landslide moments, meaning, we may see iterative approaches to a problem, and then you finally come to one show and you see, oh, they finally got it together. I think one example that I saw was LG's commercial use of the transparent screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we've seen like the pieces showing up years before. So
Hmm.
based on everything you saw on the show this year, if you were to guess forward to next year, where do you think we may see some surprising fast forward developments?
So let me talk about what I expected to see and what I didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
I expected to see a whole lot more sustainability. It was not there. It was an undercurrent, right? But there weren't really hard applications in terms of sustainability. So it'll go one of two ways next year. I mean, this year was the year of AI, right?
Yep.
Next year we will see generative AI as a landslide moment in terms of things being able to be incorporated. I mean, this year it was bolt on. There's like from a product development cycle, that's as good as they can get in terms of just sticking something on and then just putting it to market, right?
Right.
But we'll see more thoughtful incorporations of generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm really hoping to see next year is a huge swing towards sustainability. This is something that, as you know, when you look at a world full of gadgets that are all made out of rare earth materials, right?
Yeah.
Let's just break it down. We have to face this. And with what's happening on the planet right now, I don't know how we can't
Right.
talk about it. So that's what I'm really hoping to see it swing next year. There was some bubbling under, like the wonderful sort of see-through solar panels, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're beautiful
Right.
and they're super, super good. So there's some great stuff there. But
Right.
the SK booth was sort of a masterpiece in irony because that was not a story about sustainability.
I was
It
going to
was,
bring up SK. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I said that was like their whole headline was sustainability, and then they brought they brought all the plastics.
they got all the plastics, all the dyes, all the colors, all the electricity.
Yeah.
And like, I think we missed the brief on this one. Yep,
Mm,
definitely. So
good.
anyway, that's my hope for next year.
Sarah, thanks so much. Super helpful, and always, I don't see you enough. To see you once a year at one conference is not enough. So you're welcome back on the show anytime you want to talk about anything, and I'd love to have you back.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Bryndan.
What did you see at CES, Tim, that like when you woke up in the morning a couple days later, you woke up thinking about that was pretty cool? What were a couple of the key hits for you?
I think so to me it's a balance of like brand new things that are sort of like surprising and unexpected blended with the incremental, right?
Mm-hmm.
So incremental is kind of the baseboard of this show, right? Where we see things that are a little bit of the future, a little bit more of the future, the next year is a little bit more of the future, and then we get to some point where it's actually true product, true marketplace,
Right.
true something that's flowering into something real and substantial. Let's start with that first. So, for example, walking on the floor, Hisense, right, which is a big Chinese CE manufacturer, one of the largest now TV manufacturers with previously multiple TV operating systems and now their own called Vide.
Yep.
So welcome to the mix of now 9 or 10 operating systems for TV streaming. But Hisense, like a lot of the big electronics manufacturers, like the LGs and the Sonys and the Samsungs of the world, are very much involved in lots of different things and lots of different iterations of things. The thing that struck me at the Hisense booth, among many others, was their Art TV setup, which, if you remember, Samsung about 5 years ago debuted something called a Frame
Right.
TV. And what that is to most people who know now is essentially a high quality, high pixelated imagery centric screen that not only operates as a really good high end television set, but also, when not used for television, can essentially replicate a piece of art, right?
Right.
Or a series of pieces of art. I think Samsung sort of created the market for it. But if you saw the multiple versions that now Hisense offers, right? Um, just tremendously stylish, very high quality, and numerous versions of.
Right.
That to me is a really good example of something that was an idea from one mostly company a number of years ago, and now has essentially become mainstream, if you will. Imitation being arguably the highest form of flattery, certainly consumer electronics, with a whole suite of offerings from a competitive consumer electronics company. So that to me is like, of the new stuff, the brand new stuff. I mean, nothing really surprises me, but the translucent, transparent TV screen that one saw when walking into the LG booth.
Yep.
I don't know how new that is. I think that's always sort of been nibbling at the edges of the future. But I think the way that it gets now presented into the marketplace, right? It's not available for sale yet. There's no price for it. But the ability to see something, see through it, a screen, yet literally have the ability to have programming on that screen and then manipulate it either way,
Right.
is a pretty interesting breakthrough, and not just for television, but I think actually for things like in-store, place-based media, out-of-home media, that kind of stuff. So to me,
Yeah.
from a television and media perspective, and that's sort of where my heritage is, those things kind of struck me as being pretty impressive and arguably real.
You know what I didn't see in that transparent television was any integration where they're using a camera. Because it strikes me that you could now make the argument that this will be another platform for mixed reality. If it knows what's behind it or in front of it, and it can react to either movement or objects, then is it a replacement for holding your phone up and looking at mixed reality?
Sure, and then to extend that, right, the augmented and virtual reality kinds of things, right, in the CES realm, to me, was still very much a cordoned off area of
Yep.
small companies. It felt like it was slowly, incrementally getting better or more interesting. The one thing that struck me was that the idea of goggles versus, glass lenses, to even things that are just more sensors and just reliant more upon, say, one's gestures,
Right.
that seemed to be becoming a bit more mature. And I think, the next sort of salvo in this evolution is going to be Apple's launch of their $3,800 set of goggles. Might be the high end opportunity, or the jolt, I guess, the market could use. But we saw plenty of lesser priced alternatives, both on the full goggles headset thing, to, I think, a pretty strong number of firms, all trying to figure out their way through what a more stylish, eyeglass lens approach might look like. Right? I really saw some movement in trying to add style and fashion, if you will, to the process. And obviously, that's a tension between engineers and technology and stuff that people actually would not mind being caught wearing on the streets of Manhattan, let's say,
Right.
and how you balance functionality with fashion and or design to make that kind of stuff happen. Again, going back to the art TV thing, right? There's technology and design finally coming together. I think that actually is a dual tension that I always look for at this kind of a show. I think it over indexes, and logically so, around engineering, technology, possibilities, right? But what often lacks is refined product design,
Yeah.
or fashion, or incorporating the real world, if you will, into it. And arguably, that's not what the show is about, but it kind of is, right? Because it has consumer embedded in its name. But look, embedded in its name, right, is also the name show, right? And
Right.
as I said to my tours, 40 to 50% of what you see on the floor is BS, right? It's not real, and it's designed not to be real, because these are ideas, aspirations, looking for a way into reality and a business model or models. And some make it and some don't. That's kind of the fun and the confusion, I guess, around the show every year.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Apple's offering versus XREAL in terms of the virtual reality interface device?
Look, I'm not sold on the whole augmented reality thing completely, right? To me, it's the ultimate removal from the real world, right? I'm opting out of the real world and I'm going to immerse myself in something. And I'm not saying there aren't great opportunities and possibilities with that, right? I mean, the ability to virtually travel when one can't afford to actually physically travel, or to be immersed in another environment that's in another part of the world that allows for multiple participation, like a conference, like a Davos of digital or something like that. I think those are educational purposes, same thing. I'm high on all of those scenarios, right? What I don't sort of grok onto is sort of the let me ditch the real world and just like go into complete fantasy land.
Yeah.
Fine, I see that as entertainment, and I see there are opportunities for that too, but I don't get as excited about that. Where I do get more excited about, this will answer your question, is the mixing of the real and the virtual, right?
Right.
So to me, that sort of augmented reality thing, just simply improving one's life on a day-to-day basis, right? So if I'm wearing a pair of glasses that are somewhat stylish, that might adjust with the sun, with the lens, like why I would buy lenses in the first place or sunglasses, but then also allows me to overlay some virtualness or virtuality to the real world, like I am walking in Manhattan. I just came up from the subway and I'm not quite sure exactly where I am. And, Google Map is okay, but it doesn't, I have to still take time to adjust to that. When I have glasses on, not to the awareness of anybody because they're fashionable and they look like, God forbid, glasses,
Yeah.
I can actually see what the building is or what's behind that building, so to speak, or the areas that I'm looking for to go towards navigationally. Or maybe I do stumble across a street sign that says Cousin Brucey Way, right? Cousin Brucey, who's that? Well, he's a longtime DJ in the New York City area and
Yeah.
legendary. He's got one of those New York City street names after him, right? So there's a little story there, and that could be fun for a second or two, right? So to me, that feels more realistic, more valuable, more consumer friendly, more a solution. So, I mean, look, Apple is historically really good at creating a high end product for a particular problem, issue, something, right? The iPhone being perhaps the best example, right? Phones were a thing before the iPhone came, but they refined it, right?
Right.
And as you know, Apple has always been a hallmark of fashion and design and elegance in that regard. Sometimes that's what it takes to get things over to that next level. So I think, any of these companies that are in the lens business or in the goggles business, they're all probably really good and they're getting better technically. To me, I look for the design and the price point that makes it sort of worth it. $3,800 price point does not seem mass market to me.
Right. Let's talk about commerce and all this. You come from a world and an expertise in broadcast and advertising. Let's talk about what integrations
and interior design, as you can see in my my office. That's a mess right now, but there you go.
What do you see, and what do you imagine we may see in terms of integrations into people's lives via the new technologies that we're seeing?
Yeah, in some respects, I think some of it's old stuff kind of just baked into new, right? So you look at streaming advertising right now, depending on the industry reports and stuff. The idea of interactivity, right, is something that is, for people like me, is just like, okay, eye roll city, because we've seen so many attempts to bring interactive push button technology, squeeze the screen, all these kinds of things, connect it with the device, follow little, let's go follow through. However, I do think that something very simple that was um, howled at creatively 10 years ago is actually becoming a very easy on ramp to enabling television video streaming to a device or follow through. And that's the QR code, right?
Right.
I can tell you stories about the creative directors who, were aghast at having that ugly little swatch on whatever they were finally producing. But I got to tell you, it's a very easy, elegant, and consumer-friendly way to bridge. I like to call it dimensionalization, right? The ability to take, and this guided some of my early stage startup investments when I was back in the agency holding company space with a ventures arm or two. The idea of being able to go further with something, should you want to, right? Now, a QR code certainly appears garish, right, in a creative 16 by 9 ad environment, right? But
Yep.
if you're interested to have that visual cue that it's there and available to you, I think is a very convenient on ramp. I think over time, it could probably elevate to an assumption that whatever is there. Maybe it's just simply taking a shot of the actual screen itself with the screen recognizing, right? I think the elegance really matters, and the availability of that to the average consumer really matters. And I think that's kind of an interesting solve for a problem, right? When somebody's interested in something, instead of writing it down or remembering a URL code or a phone number, God forbid,
Right.
the ability to kind of push a something that's there in a phone environment seems to be really, and I think you'll see a lot more of that, whether you like it or not. And I think you'll see some creative fun with barcodes as well, and maybe some evolutions of barcodes into something a little bit more creatively friendly.
Yep.
But that's to me is a nice connective tissue there. And by the way, that helps from a measurement perspective and an outcomes perspective, right? When marketers are trying to assume if something's working or not.
Yeah. On that note, I went to XREAL and there was the main kind of forward facing display. And then if you went behind, you could make an appointment and go to the back rooms where you get a more robust experience. And I got to speak to the manager of that place. He showed me these three, I don't even know how to explain them, except they look like QR codes, multicolor QR codes. But they had a floating magnet embedded in each one. So you can do position 1, position 2, position 3 by just sliding an element inside the QR code. Or you could rotate one, there was an arrow, and you go to multiple positions. And each time you altered the position of one of those QR codes, a different result was triggered inside the virtual environment in this case, because you put on their glasses and say, well, I can toggle this magnet up or down. That gives me a different QR code, and it gives me a different digital element inside. So the QR code, I think, is exactly right, and I think it has to be accepted across the board, but I think that we're already seeing use beyond it, where that should be kind of passe, and like everybody should adopt it, because this other recognition technology is already here and can be used and allow the scanner some options as to where their final destination is. Pretty cool.
Yeah, look, I think what you're also describing is the variability of that, right? So, like, if you're doing a QR code, right, one has to create many multiple versions of that, maybe even thousands, depending on how many creative units are going out there, right? Just as a simple exercise to
Yeah.
see, okay, who clicked on or around one particular ad where it ran, right?
Yeah.
That's also not creatively viable, right, from a production perspective, right, to create 10,000 separate QR codes, right? So there's probably a next generation variability, some of which you just maybe described as a way to do that, where it's maybe an on-demand kind of production code of some sort, or something that does vary by when time stamped or whatever. So I think that's probably the next generation, especially if people get comfortable with it, right? So to me, it's just, regardless, it's a very dumbed down, if you will, simple way to offer a bridge to further information should
Yep.
people be interested. And I think that it kind of feels like it's going to be more ready for that. And again, whatever the glass is, whatever the recognition is, could be a glass, could be a phone or whatever, just seems to be kind of, it has to be part of the future of commerce.
We see when we go multiple years to these conferences, as you described earlier, we see kind of these iterations, and then we might see a watershed moment. If you could forecast forward to what we might see next year, based on what we're seeing now, what do you expect to see, or what would be a nice surprise?
So look, I come from the content and advertising and programming side of things, right? So that's kind of my bias and my expectation, right? So will there be other things from outside that lens? No question. But I think the breakthrough I'm looking for very shortly is, and it's already starting to happen a little bit around the edges, is streaming personalization, in particular around live events and specifically sports.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The idea where I'm watching the game is available to me through legitimate means, and I have also through legitimate means the ability to customize the audio, customize the video offerings I'm seeing, alt casts, being able to share the event with my friends in sort of a group chat kind of setting, or a watch party environment.
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, the thing that hastens it is not commerce and is not necessarily connectivity with other people viewing at the same time, but betting, right? The
Right.
ability to allow things like prop bets and whatever burns you're throwing at your friends who missed a prop bet or whatever it is, and all that data that comes with it, right? Assuming the latency issue is solved, right? Because that matters. But I think the dam bursts when one of the major gambling players offers an app that incorporates not only their betting features but also live streams of the matches of the games that they cover that they have rights for, and that enables basically it becomes two in one, right? It becomes the ultimate interactive, um, portable viewing experience for the game, right? How much you want to interact with it, how little depends on what you want to do. Do you want to cast it,
Right.
and lean back completely, or do you want to go deep into it? And the actual gambling, betting component for those who choose to do that too. That to me just seems like too big of an opportunity for the business side of it to not happen. And I think that's what ESPN Plus evolves to, given now that ESPN Bet exists. I think the fusion of programming and betting will be a win for consumers from who want to personalize their experiences, whether they bet or not. That's
I
my
like it.
guess.
It definitely does seem like the vehicle for spending to allow a lot of different options to be created, for sure. That actually leads to my question. You may have answered it already. My question to you was, what or where is the current wild, wild west in terms of tech spending?
I think everybody's falling all over each other to define and operationalize what AR is. Excuse me, not
Mhm.
AR, AI. Get your
Acronyms, right?
get your acronyms correct, Tim. Gee whiz. Artificial intelligence, right, is such a. I think it's already overhyped, and I think it's already misused, and I think it's already genericized a whole bunch of different techniques and technologies and stuff. Um, but I honestly believe this show, as a branding exercise, right, made AI an elemental thing to not only be aware of, but to figure out how to bring into all facets of business and by extension life. So in the consumer electronics realm, or the byproducts of that in video production or just content production or consumption, and the processes of all that kind of stuff, commercials and programming and distribution, all those kinds of things. The question really becomes, where does AI and the various processes that fit under that umbrella make things better, faster, cheaper, right?
Right.
So the QR code may be indeed one of those ways, right? Instead of manually creating, if you will, 10,000 separate codes, is there a push button that allows gentle variations of one that makes that process less expensive and more easily achieved? I think the manner by which audio and video come together, including text to speech, and those kinds of things. I you know uh, that all said, right? I think everybody's in a chase to sort of find the bright shiny objects that do those kinds of things. Where I worry is where things like Channel One News, which is rumored to be launching at some time in the next 3 or 4 months, which is, for those who don't know, is a streaming news channel. Channel One News used to be known as it was something else in a different company environment. This is a brand new Channel One company that literally is going to be delivering quote unquote live newscasts in fully AI generated forms, right? Including right down to the on air personalities, the voices, which will be multilingual, and even the remote reporting from the scene will include elements of AI generated and or voice synthesized and amalgamated content.
Right.
So we talk about AR and VR and all that kind of stuff. Well, when we sit back and watch a newscast, and we now have to really start questioning what we're seeing now and what we're being spoken with and to. The deep fakes are getting better, and it's not just on social media platforms on our phones, but now it's going to be in the sort of television news business for the first time. And that's when stuff gets really dangerous. So, with all the cool and cost efficient stuff that can come from AI in television and video and advertising, I worry about the going too far part of it as well. And I think we all have to be very careful not to go outside those guardrails, but it's inevitable, sadly.
Yeah, I think we definitely are in need of some legislation, some definite guardrails that say either I need a label when something is beyond real, I need a label for that so I can have informed consent, or we need some definite limits. But we're not there yet. Let's find out what happens. Tim, thanks so much.
Pleasure is mine. Thanks for asking me, Brendan. Always a pleasure.
Brad, welcome to the show. What did you notice at CES that you really enjoyed that you think is worth sharing?
So, Bryndan, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's always a pleasure to see your face and talk with you. I thought generally CES 2024 had more light than heat. There wasn't a whole lot that was really blowing me away. The theme of this year's show was definitely AI, and we're at a specific interesting point with AI. I think of this as the kind of AOL CompuServe prodigy phase of AI, where there's a lot more AI coming, but we have this sort of walled garden, specifically around ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Right. I also think of it as the now serving espresso moment of AI, where everybody is adding a little soupçon of ChatGPT to things without there being interesting integrations, or really a deep transformative kind of AI. So the best example of this is Vuzix, which is there every year.
Yep.
And now they have, now serving espresso, now with ChatGPT. And I don't want to trivialize, I want to make fun of them a little bit, but it's definitely interesting to make more technology more conversational. And ChatGPT is outstanding at that. But that's not a, this changes everything moment with AI. And so the one that I think, and it wasn't their first time at CES, but the thing that really made me stop in my tracks and just think, oh, wow, this really does change things, was a company from the Shenzhen region of China called Time Kettle. And I think we were there together at one point. So Time Kettle, if you look, for those of you in the viewing audience, I've got my Apple AirPods in. Time Kettle has a bunch of different form factors, but one of them is earbuds that have real-time translation with all of the compute, which is not a phrase I really like, all of the computational power inside the devices themselves. So they have a thing with a phone app. They have a little thing that looks like one of those wireless speakers. They've got a lot of different things. But the idea that you could be walking around a country where you don't speak the language and someone could come up and talk with you and you would understand what they're saying, that is remarkable. That's like the universal translator from Star Trek. It's like the Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It also, because it's real now, it made me think, wait a minute, how did that translator in Star Trek work? Because, they're wearing something. Is there like a little speaker coming out of the device?
They never went into it.
Yeah, it shows it's called an aporia in literary studies. There's this real gap, but particularly for multinational teams, multilinguistic teams, for business collaboration, for diplomacy, for forms of travel. You still have to read street signs in a language you don't know.
Right.
But it really, that is the thing that I thought just would free so many people up, particularly people who aren't terribly good at picking up languages.
Right.
And then the other thing that I'd want to sort of dig into, and then I do want to hear what you think of Time Kettle, but CES is great for trends. Right? This is the year of AI. We've had the year of 3D TV. We've had the year of 3D printing. And this particular trend about real-time translation accelerated almost immediately after CES, because last week Samsung announced a bunch of new AI smartphones which feature real-time translation. So It's not Time Kettle so much itself as a company. They had a lot of questions I had a lot of questions they couldn't answer, but it's this idea that language as a barrier to commerce, to discourse, to art, to business is going to vanish almost completely. That's the thing that I thought was the biggest deal this year, which for the people who manufacture TVs is probably quite disappointing. But what did you think?
You touched on a lot, but what I thought was that my first question and challenge to the person at Shenzhen Time Kettle was, how is this different from what I'm already doing with my phone, with Google Translate or any other app that does it? And her response actually broke the barrier for me of real appreciation. And she said, well, when you do it with your phone, you have to center around the phone. I have to talk to the phone, and then my guest has to talk to the phone. With their device, I can keep this in my pocket or set it down within Bluetooth range, and now we can explore the environment. We don't have to keep coming back to this face-to-face geography with the device. And so I thought that was cool, but I still think their main value has to be in the software. Otherwise, where's the value? How come they can't just be hit over the head and usurped by the next provider doing the same thing? Is it a protectable idea? And because you love science fiction so much, and you bring it up, I would love to see the next phase, or maybe 2 down the line, being a contact lens or eyeglass component to this, so that I can read those signs in the language that I don't speak. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, so in my novel, which was called Red Cross, which came out quite some time ago, I actually have as a pretty key component a retina casting contact lens.
There we go.
Which was that was back. That was a while ago. But yeah, I think that let's pull something out of that though, which is what we're talking about is the increase in ambient computing. And the idea that no matter where you are, you have access to a digital assistant as long as you are within voice range. That no matter where you are, you have access to an augmented reality overlay of information, so that because in my world, life without name tags is just not fair, because I produced so many shows for so many years that more people know me than I know. And so people come up to me, they're Brad, and I'm like, hey, you, and it's just embarrassing. I'm dying for the arrow that points down at the person's head and says, Bradley, it's your mother. It's like, oh, killer, mom. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's really good. Go back for 1 second to Vuzix, which, like you said, we've seen them every year at the show. And to me, they really kind of owned a territory for a while of augmented reality glasses, and they chose a niche to do. We're the industrial solution. We're for manufacturing. These things are rugged, and they give work instruction, and they're not trying to be these immersive experience glasses. I saw them take a step towards the entertainment side this year. Maybe it's smart, right? But now they have to compete with the TCLs and the Hisenses and everyone else, Apple and XREAL. What do you think about their chances there, and why do you like one versus the other?
I don't like any of them because none of them yet. I mean, the dream is so powerful, which is to be, I wear glasses habitually, the dream to have that access to information. But so many of them are so heavy, or, you have to charge up the battery every 16 seconds. I mean, it's we're just, the biggest thing that's really killing all of these technologies is batteries. Until we can have something very lightweight, or have a power source, in your pocket, it's not going to be compelling. The enterprise play, Google Glass did this, 10, 15 years ago, where they pivoted from a consumer play to an enterprise play. It's exactly like what happens with self-driving cars, where, level 4 self-driving cars are cars that are entirely self-driving, but within a specific geographical area, like a campus.
Right.
Taking something and moving it into enterprise says, we're going to limit all of the things we need to do to this controlled environment. And then Shazam, look what we can do. And they're right. Thinking about, doctors or surgeons, telehealth for augmented reality, that use case is impossibly powerful. Engineers, appliance fix-it guys, even in a kitchen, to be able to know what the ingredients are, to have the recipe that's going to just be floating in front of you. Those are all great. And they are orders of magnitude less complicated to program than a pair of glasses that you're going to wear everywhere from, the bathroom to the football stadium and everywhere in between.
That's a great point. I'm glad you made it. There was a section of the floor dedicated to digital health. What did you
Yeah.
see on that side that made you take note and maybe jot a note down?
So digital health was the other super provocative area on the floor of CES this year. There were a bunch of things that I thought were really interesting, and they all kind of build to a theme. So there was a sperm tester, and,
Right.
and I understand this is a family podcast, so we're not going to go into any of
You
the
can do it.
details, but taking an app and a piece of technology to replace an embarrassing and often expensive trip to the doctor, where a guy can figure out if his little wiggly guys are wiggling to the
Right.
extent they need to, and if there's enough of them. There's some gender politics in there that I also like, which is altogether too often the woman reflexively gets the blame when
Right.
a couple that want to have a baby, a heterosexual couple that want to have a baby, can't. So this is a leveling of that playing field. There was right next door to the sperm tester, there was a thing called the Smart Sound Stethoscope. And this was an AI stethoscope that the patient could be anywhere in the world and have a little thing that looks like kind of like a hockey puck and hold it over her or his heart. And the doctor could say, oh no, a little to the left, a little to okay, breathe, and do a remote examination where the doctor could actually hear the heartbeat with all of the attending acoustics. Now,
Right.
this is very relevant to me. My dad is a retired cardiologist. So I grew up as his guinea pig, lying on the thing with an ultrasound and watching my heartbeat. And the idea that you could listen to someone's heart. He had international patients. And 30 years ago, he had a patient in Panama. If he could have listened to that person's heartbeat from Los Angeles, that would have spared that person an expensive trip to Los Angeles.
That's right.
It would have, and that also leads to one of the things that we're seeing with digital health, which is moving from an inflection point basis to a continual monitoring basis. For people with diabetes, instead of having to prick your finger 5 times a day, there's a sensor that will monitor your blood sugar all the time.
Right.
I have an elderly relative who wears an Apple Watch, and it monitors his heart rate. So that changes there. There were two other exhibits in digital health that I thought were fascinating.
Okay.
The first was Blue Sky AI, which can monitor people's emotional state using a webcam. So the technology, to your point about back at Time Kettle, the technology is not that complicated.
Right.
It's just a webcam that you stick in the cabin of a car, or like the webcam I'm looking into right now. And using their proprietary algorithm, they can see if a woman is depressed, is suffering from postpartum depression. They have an automobile execution where it can create microclimates so that everybody's comfortable in a car. But it's the capturing technology is really quite simple, just a webcam. And a similar engagement on the same floor was a thing called Neurologics.
Yep.
And as with Time Kettle, they have a webcam and an algorithm that measures blood rate, blood pressure, in this extraordinary sort of quick scan of your health. I just had labs done today, early this morning, and the idea that I might not have to have all of those things done by somebody sticking a needle in my arm is great. And
Right.
and also, although the phlebotomist did a great job, the other thing that was fascinating about Neurologics was the form factor, that they had it on the phone, on a tablet, but they're building these magic mirrors where someone sits down. They call it a video selfie, which I thought was provocative but a bit silly. But with the video selfie, you would sit there for 30 seconds. It would, gazing soulfully into the mirror, adjusting your hair. And then it would, grind, and you'd see smoke pop out. And then magically it would come up with, a real indication of what your health is. Imagine putting those right next to the blood pressure cuff. You stick your arm in every pharmacy, at the gym. as I mentioned to you before we started, I spent a few hours the other day digging my driveway out because it had turned into a gigantic sheet of ice in the winter storm. And there was a moment where I thought, oh, I'm about to have a heart attack because my heart was really going.
Yep.
It would have been nice to have something to look at in order to find out that I wasn't going to die.
Right.
And so, surprise, I didn't. But spoiler alert. But
you had a busy day.
what's really, yeah, it's been crazy. Here's the thing that I think is important about digital health, the kind of the theme that you can pull out in general, which is disintermediation and distribution.
Okay.
It used to be that in order to get your healthcare needs met, you would have to go somewhere, unless you were one of the lucky people who had a doctor who made house calls. But for the vast majority of people, you would have to go to a doctor, go to a clinic. You'd have to see another person in order to get diagnostics done.
Right.
And what all of these things are doing are taking that geographical necessity away so that you can go elsewhere, you can have the equipment come to you, you can extend the reach of a doctor, you can replace a doctor. Nobody in digital health ever wants to use the D word, which is diagnostic, because
Right.
that holds them to a higher standard. But just imagine, I always like to think about colliding trends. And another trend that we can link to digital health and to this, again, disintermediation and distribution would be drones. Like, imagine if instead of having to go someplace, a drone shows up and drops something and you prick your finger, you do this, it straps some sensors to yourself. It really could change healthcare for people. The biggest question, as is always the question in this country, is how do you pay for it? Who pays for it? How do you make it affordable for everybody as opposed to only rich people? But that's the big trend that I'm seeing in digital health, which I think is very exciting. And I'm hoping that we see even more next year.